What up, what up, what up? It's your boy, Coach Jack. Welcome back for another episode of the REUP Podcast, where we talk about things of the past, things that's happening in the present, and the future in this life that we call life in football, right? So today's episode is going to touch on some things that, we like to call expectations and standards. What are they? How do we go about them? Um, what drives us? Where did it come from? So the first things first. You hear a lot of cliches out there. You hear a lot of people, talk about the standard is the standard. You know, setting the standard. Well, here's the thing: standards um, are subjective, right? They're subjective to every individual. They're subjected to every individual program. They're subjective to who's at the top of the programs, the heads of the table, so to speak, and so on and so forth. So, really, when you talk about, what is a standard, it's up to you, right? But as you go about setting your own individual standard, it's really about resetting every single day, right? Because you have an expectation, you have, certain things that you really want to accomplish, right? Certain things that you go about doing your day that, all right, this is what I want to take care of. This is what I want to do. How can I accomplish it? Well, once you've accomplished it and once you've, gotten to that expectation and you've met the standard of that expectation, well, guess what? You have to continue to do it again, right? So you kind of have to reset your standard every single day in order to meet the expectations of that day. Because ultimately, here's the thing: when you wake up in the morning, you have to execute with a purpose. Like you woke up with a purpose. You woke up with a purpose to get the job done every single day, right? And that's just going to be, the foundations of where your standard is, right? So what does it look like to reset your standard every day, right? And from the standpoint of, biblically speaking, it talks about, renewing your mind every day. Well, that's the same exact process right there. Every day is a battle, every day is a struggle. There are going to be some days where you don't feel like getting out of bed. There's going to be some days where you don't feel like doing the work. You don't feel like putting in the work. You don't feel like going to the weight room. You don't feel like doing this and doing that. Whatever the case may be. We all have days like that. It's just, what are you going to do to overcome it? What are you going to do to put yourself through that mental grind, through that mental, pain or whatever you want to call it? How are you going to take yourself and mold yourself into being the person that you want to be, being the athlete that you want to be, the football player you want to be, whatever sport that it is you play? You have to make sure that the things that you are putting forth that day, you are resetting every single day, right? And every single thing needs to line up and match up to be what you want to be, right? So ultimately, when it comes to, resetting, that's what it is. It's just renewing your mind daily, right? Renewing your purpose daily. For me, I know that I'm going, when I wake up and, my daily schedule, I wake up about 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes earlier, it depends on what I got to do. I wake up about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the first thing I do is I'm on a 30-minute walk, right? 30-minute walk. And during that time, I'm sitting having conversations with God, right, with the Father above, and it just kind of resetting my priorities in that way, where I'm like, okay, what is your will for me today? What are the things that you want me to accomplish for the kingdom? And then obviously, we all have our bit of selfishness that we like to throw into, prayer, which, obviously results in supplication, right? I mean, but ultimately it's resetting the structure of the day. So as we go forth throughout the day, now I understand, hey, I got to get X, Y, and Z done. If I get X, Y, and Z done, then now all of a sudden I feel accomplished. I feel like, it's a success or whatever the case may be throughout the day. So ultimately, when when you have, that standard in mind, and you have the accomplishments that you want to get, sometimes we don't meet those expectations, right? So for me, what that looks like, it doesn't necessarily equal failure, right? It does not equal failure. To me, it just looks like, all right, what did I learn from not being able to accomplish what I wanted to? So that way, when I'm starting to circle back, when I'm starting to, look for things that I do want to correct, then I'll have those lessons, right? So it's not necessarily a failure, it's lessons. It's the things that you have to go about your day, like, all right, I got to make sure that the next time that I do this, I don't do that, right? Because this didn't get me where I wanted it to be. So just understand, yeah, it's kind of like talking to yourself a little bit, right? And understand it, because sometimes when you start to play back stuff in your head, and man, I wish I wouldn't have did that, or I wish I wouldn't have did that. Well, utilize those, because there is going to be a next time. Okay, listen to me when I tell you this. Just when you think there's not going to be another chance, or there's not going to be this, there's not going to be that. There are some instances where you only got one shot, right? But majority of the time, something is going to come back around for you, and something is going to give you another shot and give you another chance, so that you may execute the things that you need to execute in order to be successful, right? And whatever success looks like for you, that is for you, right? Nobody else can tell you what success looks like. Nobody can define what success looks like for you, unless you're into the external validations, right? And that's a whole nother topic. But for the most part, your standard, your expectations, as long as you meet those, then it's a success, right? It's a success. But if you don't meet your standards and your expectations, you can't look at that as a failure. You have to look at it as a lesson. Either a couple things. Either you didn't execute the way that you should have, or you're not fully prepared the way that you think you're prepared. So fix those, and then we can start to continue exactly what it is that we're supposed to do, and how we're supposed to go about doing things. So ultimately, I think that, success and failure, and you know understanding the standards and executions, and everything, they kind of all intertwine. They really do. They really all intertwine. So you have to understand that your standard, your execution, your success, and your failure are all up to you. You're the cause, you're the effect. Everything that's inside of you, everything that has been bred from your environment, the things that are around you, everything that you have been raised, you know, brought up, taught, mentored to do. That's why you also have to make sure you're around like-minded people, or people that have been places that you quite frankly haven't. You've never been there. You've never done the things that you're dreaming of doing. Get around people who have done it. Get around the people who understand where you're trying to go, what you're trying to be, and then go emulate or take what it is that they do and make it your own. Nobody can do this thing alone. Nobody can do this thing alone. Everybody needs somebody, or some type of help or something like that, right? So you have to make sure that everything kind of lines up the way that you're supposed to do. But here's the other side of the coin too. When it lines up, when life lines up and everything is where you're supposed to be, how it's supposed to be, when it's supposed to be, you have to deliver. If you don't deliver, then there is nobody else to blame but you, right? You got to look in the mirror. You got to understand that the person that's looking back at you is the one that's going to dictate whether it is a success or a failure. And that's period. That's all it has to do, right? So the things that we talk about, resetting your standard every single day. First and foremost, before you reset your standard, you have to learn what your standard is. Learn what your standard is. Learn how to reset that standard every day. We have to execute, and then we have to keep doing it over and over and over again until there's a new goal to accomplish. Right. So just remember that, words for the wise. This has been the REUP Podcast with your boy Coach Jack. I appreciate you taking the time. Just a little quick, little quick session, man. But remember, champions never let nothing phase them. When in doubt, rise to the occasion. REUP.